after the 3-minute highlight reel of Paris and Rick's video was sent out to the media and then made its rounds online, Paris Hilton and her team made it very clear that they thought her ex Rick Solomon was the one who leaked the tape. Her rep was quoted in the news calling Rick vile and disgusting, and another source told the press that Paris was nearly comatose when the tape was being filmed, saying, "She is so out of it, you can see the whites of her eyes. She's so far gone, she is drooling. It is the most disturbing video I have ever seen." Well, as you can imagine, Rick Solomon ain't about to let those accusations fly, and so he claps back with a $10 million lawsuit against Paris Hilton, her parents, and her publicist for defamation, or for making false statements that damaged his reputation. This caused one writer to comment, excuse us for asking, but how can a person who operates a business named Beverly Hills Pimps and Hoes have his reputation sink any lower? Well, let's allow the attorneys for Rick Solomon to explain, because they came hard for Paris and her team. In the complaint that they filed with the court in November of 2003, they wrote, "This case arises from the unsavory tactics used by the powerful Hilton family to preserve the image that they have created over the years for their daughter Paris Hilton. By using high-priced publicists, the Hilton family has portrayed Paris Hilton as a privileged heiress, a cutting-edge fashion icon, and a larger-than-life Hollywood starlet. The creation and management of this facade has apparently paid off, as Hilton has become famous merely by acting famous and has been slated to star in a new television reality show on Fox. However, when this delicate facade is tested by an unpleasant truth, the Hiltons will do whatever is necessary to protect this phony veneer, even orchestrating a malicious and outrageous publicity campaign aimed at portraying plaintiff Richard Solomon as a, quote, criminal without any basis whatsoever, and as a rapist who took advantage of a sweet and innocent girl who had no idea what was happening to her. Hilton was neither on drugs nor alcohol, nor was somehow incapacitated, and not only did she consent to the filming, she was an active participant throughout. Hilton repeatedly positioned herself in front of the camera, and at one point she literally pushes Solomon out of the frame. So clearly, Rick Solomon and his legal team were prepared to defend his honor against the Hiltons' accusations, and that included the question about her age at the time of filming. Remember, the Hilton family had issued a statement saying that anybody involved in the video was guilty of criminal activity, and that was right after they'd said how upsetting it was that a tape between a younger girl and her older boyfriend was released. And this was all quoted in a New York Post article that also said that attorneys for the Hiltons had looked into whether Paris was underage. And even though they didn't make any specific allegations, Rick's attorneys argued that the Hiltons were clearly throwing shade at their client. They wrote, "Defendants cleverly hinted to the press that there might be an issue as to whether Hilton was underage, which they obviously could have dismissed with one phone call, and certainly without vocalizing it to a New York Post reporter for instant publication." But Rick Solomon and his lawyers were not the only ones concerned about Paris's age, because Kevin Blatt over at Marvad said that the idea that Paris might have been underage at the time of filming, quote, scared the shit out of them. The attorney for Marvad, Derek Newman, also said, "My client wants nothing to do with child pornography. We don't take these kinds of allegations lightly." Kevin also said, "These guys are very ethical, very honest about what they're doing." And he said that's why Marvad put everything on pause with their release, so that they could do their due diligence and find out whether their trusted source, Donald Thrasher, may have lied when he promised that Paris was old enough for this tape. And y'all, obviously this is a load of BS, because the time for due diligence to confirm Paris's age would have been before you signed a deal for the footage with some random old roommate. It would have been before you posted a press release on your website announcing that this footage was going to be dropped online, and it would have been before you sent a teaser video out to major news outlets. Marvad definitely should have confirmed Paris's age before all of that went down, and you'd think that Marvad's attorney, Derek Newman, would have insisted on that. But maybe he was more of a gambling man, because he told the news if Marvad had to make a bet, we'd bet she was over 18, which is a ridiculous statement coming from a lawyer for an adult company, because Marvad could not just release this footage and then leave Paris's age to chance, seeing as by law, they were required to get solid proof of her age first. And that is something that Kevin Blatt straight up admitted on camera that he understood.
USC 2257, which is the law that states that all the parties involved have to sign off that they're over 18 years of age and supply 2 forms of identification that proves that they're over 18 years of age.
This federal law requires that producers of adult content verify the age of anybody that they show engaging in or assisting another person to engage in sexually explicit conduct. And the law specifically states that this age verification must be done by examining the IDs of every performer. And not only that, but producers are required to keep records proving that they've done this. And they must disclose exactly who has those records and where they can be found, and include that information in every piece of adult content that they release, so that if the federal government ever needed to drop by to investigate, they would know exactly where to look to find these records to verify that the law had been followed. But the best part of this federal law is that if a producer of adult content did not follow these record-keeping requirements, they could face jail time. So y'all best believe that Kevin and the crew at Marvad were not about to risk going to prison by dropping a video of Paris Hilton based solely on some flimsy oral promise from Donald Thrasher, when the law required that they keep records of Paris's ID.
I was very young at the time. They say I was 19, but I was not 19.
And even though Kevin Blatt has insisted that Sex Brat likes to do everything by the book and it's conscientious about the law, I got some questions about that, because if Marvad actually checked Paris's age on her ID, then why did their attorney Derek Newman say that after Paris's team implied she was too young to film, he told Marvad to play it safe and pull the plug on releasing her tape? It makes you wonder whether Paris Hilton's attorneys may have hit Marvad up with a whole bunch of legal threats, reminding them of their obligations under Section 2257 after Marvad announced to the press that it was going to drop this tape, because Paris Hilton's attorneys reportedly got Marvad to agree never to air the footage of her and Rick and to destroy all copies of the tape, and in exchange, Paris promised not to sue Marvad.
So what is the agreement now between you and Paris Hilton, that you will not show the tape?
Sexbot.com will not be airing this tape in any way, shape, or form.
So did she pay you for that?
No.
No, she proved to you that you don't have the rights to it.
Correct.
The original tape was not supposed to ever see the light of day because we didn't have the rights to put it out. Paris had not signed off on it, Rick had not signed off on it, and all we got was a bull story from Rick's roommate who said he's got the rights, he's going to do it for Rick.
So let's just recap up to this point. First, Marvad promotes a tape of someone having sex that they knew they did not have the rights to, but not only did they promote it, they shared it with news outlets, which caused the video to go viral on the internet. And despite all of that, Kevin says that Marvad is actually the victim in this whole situation. And you might ask, how do you figure that? Well, Kevin says it's because Marvad paid Donald Thrasher upfront for the video because they intended to sell it online and recoup that investment with plenty of profits on top of that. But now that they had to pull the plug on this release, they would never get the chance to show it to the public and make their money back. See, in the alleged license agreement between Marvad and Thrasher, Marvad agreed to pay Thrasher $50,000 in advance, and then they said they'd pay him 30% of the revenue from the tape. But like so many other aspects of this story, this don't make no sense. Why would Marvad pay Donald Thrasher $50K up front for a tape that Kevin admitted they don't have the rights to, that Kevin admitted was based on a bullshit story, and that under federal law could land them in prison? None of this adds up. But that doesn't stop Kevin from pretending that it does to any journalist that would talk to him. Kevin told Adult Video News that, unfortunately, Sex Brat is out a lot of money for the purchase of this tape. He told the Seattle Times, "We're the victims here because we're out $50,000.
Why are you guys a victim?
Well, here, Sexbot.com went out and actually paid some big money for this tape, and in good faith, really believed that this tape was going to be legal in every sense of the word, and that we wouldn't have any issues.
We just really believed in our heart of hearts that everything was totally legal.
You can't put out there without someone's release on it.
Now, speaking of that alleged license agreement between Marvad and Rick Solomon's old roommate Donald Thrasher, this license agreement says that the reason that Rick and Paris filmed this video of themselves having sex was for the purpose of showing their, quote, friends and fans. But then it says that Paris started saying there was no video and dragging Rick in the press and calling him a lying scumbag, and because of that, the agreement says that Rick wanted to clear his good name and show that, yes, this video did in fact exist. But it says that because he was now married to the famous actress Shannon Doherty, who had starred in the hit series 90210, Rick Solomon could not just come right out and drop this tape under his name. And so the license agreement says that that's why Rick recruited his roommate at the time, Donald Thrasher, to put this tape out for him. And it says that Rick gave Thrasher the right to sell the tape. And again, he did this not in writing, but orally. And then it says Rick told Thrasher to go out and find a distributor in the adult entertainment industry to market the video to the world. Now, believe it or not, Donald Thrasher appears to be a legit person, despite how the last name Thrasher seems conveniently on brand for a saga about a sex tape. Thrasher told the Associated Press point blank that he and Rick had an agreement to sell the video and that Rick gave him the rights and gave him the tape, period, end of story. Thrasher also went on a show called Celebrity Justice, which Harvey Levin from TMZ hosted, and on that show, Thrasher said that Rick gave him specific instructions, detailing ways that he could shop the tape around and get a deal with an adult distributor. Thrasher also said that after Marvat paid him that $50,000 advance, he turned around and gave Rick half of that money in cash. So clearly, Donald Thrasher was placing all of the blame on Rick Solomon and claiming that Rick was the puppet master setting this whole scheme up. Now, Rick aggressively denied this. His attorney told the New York Post that Rick had nothing to do with the sale of the tape, that he never got paid a penny from Thrasher, and that Thrasher was the one who secretly took the tape from Rick's house and then made a copy of it and then returned it so that nothing would look out of place. Rick also filed a police report accusing Thrasher of stealing the tape from him, and he told E! News that Thrasher stole the tape from a hiding spot in the ceiling of his closet. But in an interview with NBC, Rick said he had the video locked up in his safe at the time, which is a little hard to add up. I mean, I guess it's possible, but why would Thrasher steal this video from Rick in the first place? Well, of course, Rick says it was because his roommate Thrasher was obsessed with him, which is exactly what you'd expect someone to say who had a collection of personal porn videos showing himself having sex. Now, Rick said he didn't make a habit of showing his explicit home movies to other people, but he said he did make a rare exception one time, and he played this footage of him and Paris Hilton while his old roommate Thrasher was around, and he said it was strange that Thrasher was reciting the words to the footage as it played. He said, "I remember looking at him going, how does this kid know my tape so well?" But aside from Rick's claim that Thrasher was obsessed with him, maybe there was another reason that somebody in Rick's circle would have wanted to steal this video. Maybe when the news got around that Paris Hilton had landed this big reality show, somebody got to thinking about how that racy tape could be worth some money in the right hands one day.
Somebody knew that she was about to blow up. It wasn't her, but somebody knew that she had this deal and knew that she was going to be a big deal.
Maybe Thrasher got to thinking, Paris is about to become super well known and she might only get 15 minutes of fame. I mean, who knows how well this brand new reality show is going to go, and if it gets canceled after a few episodes and everybody forgets about her, this might be the only chance to cash in on that tape. So, is it possible that Donald Thrasher decided to sneak that valuable footage out of Rick's house and sell it for $50K behind his old roommate's back? Well, there are definitely reasons to believe that Thrasher had the sleazy character flaws necessary to stab his friend in the back. See, many years later, Donald Thrasher ran for political office in Kentucky, and during his election, an anonymous mailer mysteriously was sent out to voters with a long list of claims about what a scummy dude Thrasher was. This mailer listed that he avoided paying taxes for years in multiple states, that he had 8 restraining orders out against him, which he later confirmed was true, that he had several warrants out for his arrest, and that he was accused of selling a stolen tape. This mailer also brought its receipts and detailed a bunch of sources, and so if you believe its allegations, then you might think that Thrasher sounds like the kind of con man who would betray his friend Rick and trick Marvad with a fake story so that they would think he had the rights to this tape and then cut him a big fat check. But speaking of that check, let's get back to Marvad. After Marvad paid Thrasher that advance, they said, look, we didn't pay that $50K for nothing, and now that we promised Paris Hilton that we're never going to show this video to anyone, we want our money back from Thrasher, and we want to get to the bottom of who's lying. Kevin tells the news that Marvad has done some due diligence and discovery lately, and that it now believes that its deal for this footage of Paris was not only done without her consent, but that it was done dishonestly. Now all of a sudden, Marvad said that it thought Thrasher had not told him the whole truth about who had the rights to the tape, and Kevin said that Marvad's attorneys were looking into the paper trail to find out whether Thrasher was lying or whether Rick tricked Thrasher to get him to sell the tape on his behalf. Kevin said Thrasher could have been set up. He could have been the front guy who was taking the fall, but we'll see how it turns out. Ooh, that sounds like a cliffhanger. Now, Marvad was not the only one, though, who was accusing Rick of being the con man in this story. There is a video of Paris Hilton with her sister Nikki while Nikki talks on the phone with Donald Thrasher, who says he was totally played by Rick when it came to this deal. Now, y'all, I am scared to play this video footage for you on YouTube because this footage came from a storage unit that Paris used to rent, but then she forgot to pay the bill for the unit, and after her stuff got auctioned off, it of course ended up online and lawyers got involved, and YouTube channels that shared videos from that storage unit started getting terminated without warning. So we ain't gonna risk that here, but I am going to dub some of the highlights from that video for you. In this video where Nikki Hilton is talking on the phone with Donald Thrasher, Thrasher says, "You guys know that Rick is a manipulator." Nikki says, "I know," and she tells Thrasher, "Paris and I know that you're a good guy and that Rick used his evil influences on you." Thrasher agrees, and he calls Rick a criminal, saying, "He tricked me, and I apologize for everything. I've been duped, manipulated. I'm not a saint, I'm not an angel, but I'm not a bad person either." Then at one point, Paris, who is sitting silently beside Nikki, whispers to her sister to say, "Rick's a con artist." And Nikki repeats that on the phone to Thrasher, and Thrasher goes on to say, "Look, I feel bad about the whole situation. I'm willing to help you because I feel bad that I was involved." And he says he'll get up in court and testify against Rick. Eventually, the call comes to an end after Nikki thanks him and says she's going to call him later so that they can get together for lunch the next day. And after she hangs up this call with Thrasher, who clearly let the Hilton sisters know that he would go against Rick with them, Paris finally talks out loud saying, "Oh, Now, y'all, the video of this phone call only shows us Paris and Nikki's face. We can't see Donald Thrasher, but we hear this voice coming from the phone, so how do we know it's really him? Well, let's do a quick little voice analysis, and I know y'all can't hear the voice, but I'll tell you, it's a little nasally, kind of high-pitched, and he has a noticeable stutter. Now, with that in mind, let me show you a video where Donald Thrasher is talking and we can see his face.
They're not taking those 9 names. They're just appointing one person. That person's not even supposed to be on the board.
Now, I am not a voice expert, but I can tell you it sounds like the same person. So if this was Donald Thrasher on the phone with Nikki Hilton, then that is a big twist because I have no reason to believe that the video of this call was not authentic. I mean, it came out with lots of other media from Paris' storage unit that she would have never wanted to see the light of day, including footage of her being super racist, which we'll get to later, but all of this makes me think that Thrasher might be telling the truth in this call with Nikki, where he is claiming that he was the victim of Rick's trickery and that Rick duped him into trying to sell this tape to Marvad. But what I want to know is, how would Rick even manage to manipulate Thrasher into doing something like this? Well, Thrasher also says in this call that he was using hard drugs while he was hanging out with Rick because Rick had a serious substance problem himself.
Rick was really a bad crackhead back then. He was very messed up on drugs. In fact, a lot of people in Hollywood probably have stories about Rick Solomon back in the day.
Rick has also admitted that he used to be a drug dealer during an interview with Howard Stern, where he was fidgeting so much that Howard and his co-host Robin actually asked Rick whether he was on something. Not to mention that Rick was even sued by a woman who claimed that he threw parties where all sorts of illegal drugs were freely given out to attendees. So, if all these claims are true, then you could see how the people who were in Rick's orbit might be under the influence and possibly easy to manipulate. But whatever the case, we've got lots of allegations flying around and a lot of different versions of this story when it comes to how this footage of Paris and Rick made its way into the dirty hands of the Marvad crew. So, y'all know what that means. Everybody is about to sue everybody for millions of dollars.
Everybody was suing everybody.
And all hell broke loose.
The Sun reported that a myriad of lawsuits were filed in all sorts of directions. Rick had already sued Paris and her parents and a rep for slandering him and for suggesting that he took advantage of Paris in the video. Marvad also drops a lawsuit. They sued Donald Thrasher for breach of contract after they say he misled them into believing he owned the rights to the video and then he didn't refund their $50,000. But then Marvad gets sued by Rick Solomon, who says he never gave them the legal right to sell this tape that he filmed and that he owned the copyright to. Paris Hilton's attorneys also went after Marvad for trying to sell this tape without her permission, and they already convinced Marvad to pull the plug on her tape without ever needing to file a lawsuit. Donald Thrasher gets sued by Rick, who says Thrasher stole this video from his house and then sold it to Marvad without his consent. And Kevin Black claimed that he was sued by everybody in this story, but he's a little sketchy on the exact numbers.
I end up getting served by the Hilton family and Paris and Rick Solomon, each suing me for $10 million.
Got sued for $20 million by the Hilton family, by Rick, by everybody came after me for $20 million. I don't know why $20 million. If you don't have $20 million, you shouldn't worry about getting sued for $20 million.
I made a game of it. Like when every time they would stand outside my door to try to process serve me, I'd hop out my back window, I'd run. I evaded them for 2 months.
Y'all look at that. Kevin wants to make himself look like a badass in this story, but you need to get your details straight. Or at least you would think that he would need to get his details straight, but in reality, the press seemed to be hanging on Kevin's every word, the more bizarre and unbelievable the saga got. One journalist wrote, "This series of events has become a titillating controversy of the moment." And of course, this tangled web of lawsuits only added to the drama, with one writer commenting, "The legal foreplay over the Paris Hilton tape continues." But don't worry, the thrilling build-up would not last forever because soon this story would climax at just the right time. Throughout the month of November 2003, article after article had come out about the circumstances of this video, from the time Kevin donated that little 3-minute teaser to the press at the start of the month, all the way to this mess of legal threats by the end of November. And then, just a couple of days later on December 2nd, the non-stop drama from the month before seemed to conveniently crescendo because that's when Paris Hilton's new reality show premieres its first episode on the Fox network.
They're giving up their plush lifestyle to live on a farm.
Despite The Simple Life being a brand new series that featured a celebutante who had never had a TV hit before, plenty of people had already heard of Paris Hilton because of the constant media coverage about her explicit tape the month before. E-Online reported that the week the show premiered, there were over 200,000 search results on Google for the terms Paris Hilton and video. But the thing is, if you searched for Paris Hilton and Simple Life, you got 95% fewer results. This suggests that viral video of Paris and Rick could have generated even more interest in Paris Hilton than she ever would have gotten from just her TV show alone, which some people might argue was an excellent situation to be faced with if you're the Fox network hoping to create a lot of buzz about your new series. And clearly Fox thought that this new series would be a hit because they gave The Simple Life a primetime slot right after American Idol, which was the most popular show in the United States. The Guardian reported that sex video gives Paris Hilton publicity money can't buy. Hotel heiress embarrassed at scandal, which conveniently coincides with the launch of her TV show. But Paris had another big debut alongside her reality show because on December 6th, just a few days after The Simple Life premiered, Paris Hilton hosted Saturday Night Live, where she did not shy away from all the news about that explicit tape.
I've had a great time this week. It's been very exciting to do live TV because there are no tapes whatsoever involved, and that makes me very happy.
The curious alignment of all this tape news with Paris's appearance on SNL and the debut of her new TV show got some folks asking whether these events were a little too perfectly coordinated.
Don't you think that's interesting timing?
There's no such thing as accidents.
Did they make that with this intent, or was it made for fun?
Another good question.
A journalist in The Guardian said suspicions are growing that the entire episode might have been one giant and well-timed publicity stunt designed to further the career of America's newest celebrity obsession. A writer on Yahoo agreed, saying, "You can't buy the type of headlines that scandal creates." Once The Simple Life began to air, Paris Hilton became a household name.
People think that I did it on purpose, because after that, all of these leaked tapes were coming out, and it almost became like a blueprint to become famous. Like, I didn't want to be known as that. Like, I didn't need to do that. Like, I always had a plan.
But no matter what Paris Hilton said, there were still folks insisting that she coordinated the tape's release so she could get as famous and rich as possible. Some people even questioned whether the explicit footage was good for the Hilton family business. A marketing expert was quoted as saying Paris's antics might add some spicy, salacious value for younger hotel guests who think she's fun. Wall Street analysts who follow the Hilton chain said the company might capitalize on Paris's notoriety by launching a line of smaller, hipper boutique hotels for 20-somethings. But with all this conversation about these risque recordings, it seemed like only a matter of time before more footage of Paris and Rick got loose. Now, up to this point, only that 3-minute teaser has gone public, thanks to those eager to share editors, perverts on online forums, and backdoor torrent sites. But y'all, there's been no official releases where people can legally buy the tape now that Marvad has backed off its plan to drop its documentary. And this could have been the end of this story right here. But as you probably already know, much more footage was about to make its way out to the masses through huge commercial releases, both online and in retail stores for adult videos. So, how did that ever happen when, at this point, everybody was suing everybody for sharing this tape without permission? Well, sexprat.com would not be the last site that tried to sell Rick and Paris's video, because another mysterious website was about to emerge with way more footage, and internet sleuths were determined to find out who was behind it.